Alright, welcome to this tips and tricks. This particular tip is a material and it's called Nature's Blend. And what it does is it automatically maps a texture onto an object without requiring UV mapping on the object itself. So this allows you to very quickly apply organic materials to surfaces that would be very difficult to unwrap, for instance, and without requiring an unwrap, without requiring any UV mapping coordinates. So it looks at the local object space to apply the materials, sort of like a cube map. So let's take a look at this little graph that I put together. So what we're going to do is apply a cube map texture, and we're going to project one map from the top using the XY plane, and then we're going to project another map. So this would look fine from above, but then kind of streak down the sides. We're going to apply a second map from the side along the x-axis, but we're going to use a fall off. So this way we're going to project using local space onto the side, and then use a fall off so that anything that's not facing the x-axis is going to fade into the next map over on the z-axis and also fade into the next map in the y-axis. So using this technique we can apply a single map projected from the three different axes with a fall off. This way we're able to create a material that will automatically map itself onto an object according to the local object space of the object itself, and also the local axis of the face. So let's take a look at that right now. Let's bring up our material editor. If we go to open, I've created a material library. If you say open material library, there's Nature's Blend Max 7. You can go ahead and open that, and this is good for Max and Max 7 and 8. And I'm going to grab the Nature's Blend RGB and also Nature's Blend Dirt. And these are just two examples to illustrate how to put this together. So if we look at RGB, I'll apply it to this object, and I'll go ahead and render so that you can see it. So if I hit render, what this does, it will automatically map the axis. So you can see here that we've got blue from above, green and red from the different axes on this object. So if I'm to orbit around, let's orbit from the top, hit render, we can see that we've got blue from above, and then we've got red from this side, and then green from the other axis. So by replacing these three colors by a texture map, we're going to get a map that's applied perfectly along this axis and then fades into the next one that's applied in the other axis. So let's take a look at this material first off. So let's go in here. We've got a mixed material. Now really what I want is three materials, but the mixed material only has two slots. So what I'm going to do is do the red on this slot, and then in the next channel put green and blue, and in green and blue just have another mix. So this is simply going to be a mix material, and inside my mix I've got one color and another mix which does the two other colors. So let's look at this really quickly here. Red. First off, our red axis is the ZX axis. So if we look at here, we've got the XZ axis, and we're using the Y axis as a fall off. So XZ axis is our red color, and we're going to use, it's here, XZ, and we're going to use local Y axis for the fall off, which we can see here. Now let's look at it a little closely here. We've got a checker pattern for the red. This would normally be a bitmap, but inside this map or anything you put on there, what's important is this. I've switched the texture mode to using, instead of explicit map channel, to using the local object XYZ. By choosing which plane, the ZX plane, this is going to map this image from the front of the object. Now once I've got this mapped, I'm going to use local Y fall off, and here again I'll use perpendicular parallel, but using local Y axis. By default this is set to camera or viewing direction, so I can bring it down to local Y axis. So this is taken care of the red color. Now we're going to go into our green and blue. And what we're going to do is the blue, just put it over everything. So blue is using the XY axis, again planar from object. And then the green is using the YZ axis, planar from object, and also using local Z fall off. So with the local Z fall off, we're going to basically do a fall off of the blue onto the green. And with this simple material now, I'll just go ahead and apply the dirt version. You'll see that even with the colored version, let's see the colored version again, we're going to see a pretty hard edge cut here between the blue. So you can see here the blue from above's got this little gradient going into the red and the green. If I bring out my material editor and just put the same exact material, the only difference is I've got inside these different channels, I've got a bitmap instead of a checker pattern, and it's just using that map. But I'm still using planar XYZ and the axis. Alright, so this material here, if I apply this to my object and render it, you'll see that even though it looks kind of obvious there, it becomes pretty much invisible when you render it. So very quickly what this does is it allows me to have a complex, bizarre object. And this is mostly valid for organic objects. If you start putting it on cubes and buildings and things like that, it might not react quite well. That's why I'm calling it Nature's Blend. And there we go. So you can see it does a really good job. And this will save you tons of time on tree trunks, on anything that's organic that you just don't want to unwrap. And let's take a look at a couple different images here. Here we go. So these are different examples. We've got, this is with the dirt map, but I've got it tiled 3 by 3. We've also got a color version. And this is with a brick. Now, even with a brick texture, you can see it does a pretty good blending between the two there. So this is with per pixel displacement using mental ray. So it does a really nice job, and it's a very simple little trick. Another little trick I'll do while I'm in here as well is show you a way of doing ambient occlusion in the viewport really quickly. Now, if I make this material 100% self-illuminated, you'll see that we'll basically ignore the lights that are set up inside this scene. So this gives us a really flat shaded look to it. So I'm really just bypassing the max standard lighting inside the viewport when you don't have a light active. Now if you want to do some ambient occlusion in here, we can quickly just put an omni light in here and move it to 0, 0, 0. And then in that light's advanced effects, we can make it only affect the ambient lighting in the scene and put on it a projector map, which will be an ambient occlusion right here. Now you need to be using mental ray for this to work, so I'm going to go into my rendering parameters and change this over to mental ray. Let's go with mental ray. And I will also turn off the self-illumination I just put on there. So by simply putting that light in the scene, here it is, and giving it ambient occlusion, we're going to be projecting ambient occlusion into the ambient lighting of this object. So now if I hit render, you'll see the difference between the two. It'll take a little bit longer to render, and it's important to note I'm on a laptop right now, so that makes it doubly slow. But this will give us that cool little global illumination-like lighting where it just darkens all the different nooks and crannies on this object, giving us a much nicer result very quickly. Now the advantage of putting it in as a light is that we can very easily have it affect the entire scene, whereas normally you would have to take this ambient occlusion material and start blending it into all of the materials of all your different objects inside the scene. Now most likely you'd want to have this ambient occlusion as a separate pass, so you would normally have a scene state or something like that set up for it. But this is a nice way of adding a great quick lighting effect to your scene. So that covers Nature's Blend.